This is Joe Biden, the resident of the United States. On Sunday, July 21st, 2024, after more than 3 weeks of speculation and pressure by just about everyone in the political sphere, Joe Biden posted this letter on social media announcing that he was dropping out of the 2024 race. Then, 3 days later, Biden addressed the nation about his decision.
You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition.
In other words, he was forced out. But how did we get here? Well, let's go back into history a little bit and do a postmortem on the re-election campaign of Joe Biden. Democrats and Biden's DOJ have done everything to hurt Donald Trump in the polls, including trying to remove him from primary ballots and bogging him down with nonsense legal cases. But none of it worked. In fact, it only made Trump stronger. Womp womp. So the Biden campaign was desperate. And on May 15th, Joe Biden's social media accounts posted a heavily edited video where Biden agreed to debate Trump. And it would turn out to be the most consequential decision of Joe Biden's re-election bid.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. And since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice.
No, you won't. In fact, it's arguable that Joe Biden even participated in the first one.
We created 15,000 new jobs, over billions of dollars in private investment to $15 for a insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they conclude beginning next year. For example, we have 1,000 billionaires in America. And what's happening? If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
It took just 10 minutes for Joe Biden to effectively end his re-election chances. But he wasn't finished.
What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more border patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
And that was it. It was the beginning of the end. Over 50 million people watched the debate live, and no amount of spin or gaslighting could convince voters that Biden's performance was anything but an unmitigated disaster. So pundits were forced to tell the truth.
That was painful. I love Joe Biden. I work for Joe Biden. He didn't do well at all. He did not do well at all.
Right now, as we speak, there is a deep, a wide, and a very aggressive panic in the Democratic Party.
There's been some real damage done that cannot be undone.
It was a really disappointing debate performance from Joe Biden. I don't think there's any other way to slice it. His biggest issue that he had to prove to the American people was that he had the energy, he had the stamina, and he didn't do that.
But he had a test to meet tonight to restore confidence of the country and of the base, and he failed to do that.
The following morning, the entire New York Times stable of contributing opinion writers called for Biden to leave the race. And by that evening, so did the New York Times editorial board, claiming, "To serve his country, President Biden should leave the race." But Joe Biden, who has wanted to be president since the 1970s, vowed that he wasn't going anywhere.
I'm here in North Carolina for one reason, because I intend to win this state in November. Are you going to see that happen? I think we are. I give you my word as a Biden, I would not be running again if I didn't believe with all my heart and soul I can do this job.
As it turns out, though, Joe Biden was the only one convinced of that, because as indicated by the very first poll conducted after the debate, the American public wasn't buying it.
Our polling unit asked voters how they view the candidates now, including their cognitive health. The results are not encouraging for the president. The number of voters who say President Biden has the cognitive ability to serve has dropped from 35% earlier this month to 27% after the debate. That's the lowest number since CBS began asking voters that question last September. Nearly 3/4 of all registered voters now say he shouldn't be running, and nearly half of Democrats say he shouldn't remain the nominee.
But Joe Biden wasn't budging. His strategy was to try and convince voters that the debate performance was an outlier, because he was working too hard or something. During a private campaign event, Biden told donors, "I didn't have my best night, but the fact is that, I wasn't very smart. I decided to travel around the world a couple times, going to I don't know how many time zones. For real, I think it was 15 time zones in a couple of weeks before the debate. And I didn't listen to my staff and came back and nearly fell asleep on stage." Then, during a meeting with Democrat governors, Governor Josh Green of Hawaii, a physician, asked Mr. Biden questions about the status of his health. Mr. Biden replied that his health was fine. "It's just my brain." So Biden's team thought that the damage done from his debate performance was reversible. But unfortunately, that would require cooperation from Joe Biden not to screw it up.
Now you probably heard we had a little debate last week. Can't say it was my best performance. But ever since then, there's been a lot of speculation. What's Joe going to do? Is he going to stay in the race? Is he going to drop out? What's he going to do? Well, here's my answer. I am running and going to win again. I'll beat Donald Trump. I will beat him again in 2020.
Well, so much for moving forward. In fact, with every subsequent Biden appearance and media interview, Joe Biden made it clear that his standing with the Democrat Party and the American voter was irretrievable.
Let's start with the debate. You and your team have said you had a bad night. But did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
Joe Biden isn't sure if he watched his own debate. Sharp as a tack, guys. But the revealing part of the interview was when Biden was asked, what happens if he lost in November?
And if you stay in and Trump is elected and everything you're warning about comes to pass, how will you feel in January?
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do. That's what this is about.
The goodest job, guys. Now, that was a tough interview for sure, but Joe Biden couldn't even handle interviews that were 100% scripted by Biden's campaign.
By the way, I'm proud to be, as I said, the first vice president, first black woman to serve with a black president.
Racial and gender identity is fluid. Joe Biden is now a black woman.
How can you assure the American people that you won't have another night like the one you did in Atlanta?
Look at my career. I've not had many of those nights. It was a terrible night, and I really regret it happened. But the fact of the matter is, how can you assure you're going to be on faith that can intervene on your way to go to, work tomorrow? Age wasn't, the idea I'm too old.
Fact of the matter is, how can you assure you're going to be out on, on your way to go, work tomorrow? Age wasn't, the idea that I'm too old. Keep in mind, that soundbite is supposed to be reassuring to those Democratic supporters who have gone wobbly.
Oh man, when you lose Jake Tapper. Even Morning Joe's Mika Brzezinski got in on the action.
Okay, so you have repeatedly said that all of these people and entities are wrong. And let me go through them. The New York Times editorial board, The Economist, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Boston Globe, Jerry Nadler, Seth Moulton. Let me go to Julian Castro, Tim Ryan, David Axelrod, David Remnick, Richard Haas. Yeah, I know which one you're responding to there. Zeke Emanuel, but they're saying that you should step aside. So what is your plan of attack moving forward? These are pretty big names.
Is to go out and keep doing their big names, but I don't care what those big names think. I'm getting so frustrated by the elites. Now, I'm not talking about you guys, but about the elites in the party who they know so much more.
And one of those Democrat elites is actor-director George Clooney, who wrote an op-ed in the New York Times titled, "I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee." Now, you might be thinking, who cares what this actor has to say about politics? Well, you might not know this, but Nipple Batman is one of the most important Democrat Hollywood fundraisers. This includes the infamous LA event, where Biden froze up in front of the audience and Barack Obama had to grab Biden's arm and lead him off the stage like a toddler. In the last 4 years, he's won many of the battles he's faced. But the one battle he cannot win is the fight against time. None of us can. It's devastating to say it, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe Big Effin' Deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. Wow, thanks for letting us know. Weeks after the fact. As Democrats, we collectively hold our breath or turn down the volume whenever we see the president, whom we respect, walk off Air Force One or walk back to a mic to answer an unscripted question. This single sentence from George Clooney's op-ed vindicates everyone, including myself, who pointed out Biden's bloopers and blunders over the last several years. Democrats saw what we saw. But instead of acknowledging the truth, they continued their gaslighting. Shut up, you ageist. It's a cheap fake. He's sharper than ever. So, you think George Clooney's gonna give back a single penny of that $30 million that was raised at the Hollywood fundraiser? Sorry, Democrats. No refunds. Next, Biden hosted the 33rd NATO summit in Washington, D.C. And just like every single event that involves Joe Biden, it would be overshadowed by a Biden blooper. But this one would be extra special.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. We're going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway.
Oh, good. He corrected himself. He's totally fine. Nothing to see here. Then, just a few hours later, Biden participated in what the White House kept referring to as Joe Biden's big boy press conference. I'm not kidding.
And so our military is working. I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people.
Please note that Biden doesn't have a commander-in-chief because he is the commander-in-chief. Also, there's no chief of staff of the military.
And I think you'll see that some of our European friends are going to be curtailing their investment in Russia. In China, as long as China continues to have this indirect help to Russia in terms of being able to help their economy, as well as help them in, as a consequence of that, their ability to fight in Ukraine.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
Is Putin ready to talk? I'm not ready to talk to Putin unless Putin's ready to change his behavior.
Moments later.
I'm prepared to talk to any leader who wants to talk, including if Putin called me and wanted to talk.
Biden's not ready to talk to Putin, but he's prepared to talk to Putin. Classic Joe Biden.
I love my staff, but they add things all the time. At the very end, I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway.
Aw, poor big boy Joe Biden is complaining he has to work. Give me a break. I mean, Joe Biden can't even finish a thought.
Look, folks, this is, well, anyway, it wasn't about just, anyway, read what his objective is. And anyway, but then again, they're better than a lot of other people here too. But anyway, you know, Biden's not prepared to sit with us unscripted. Biden's not prepared to, you know, anyway. From Wisconsin to North Carolina to, anyway. I'm going to be going down to the Johnson Library anyway.
Anyway, the highlight of the big boy presser was when Joe Biden was asked about Kamala Harris and if she had the ability to beat Donald Trump in a general election.
What concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there.
Now, let's watch that again, but focus on members of Biden's cabinet.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one, the fact is that the consideration.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan looked like he was about to cry. God, you love to see it.
Respectfully, earlier you misspoke in your opening answer. You referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Right now, Donald Trump is using that to mock your age and your memory. How do you combat that criticism from tonight?
Listen to him.
This concludes tonight's press conference. Thank you, everybody.
So the Democrats were in crisis mode, and despite the myriad of calls for Joe Biden to drop out of the race, Delaware Grandpa Defiant wasn't going anywhere.
Folks, you probably noticed there's a lot of speculation lately. What's Joe Biden going to do? Is he going to stay in the race? Is he going to drop out? Here's my answer. I am running, and we're going to win. I'm not going to change that.
And the fact is, Biden didn't need to drop out of the race. He had earned enough delegates in the Democrat presidential primaries to secure the nomination, which is why Democrats were panicking. A panic that was further exacerbated every time Joe Biden would open his mouth. Axios reported on a tense Zoom call on July 13th between Joe Biden and a group of center-left House Democrats. That was a complete disaster. We saw the same Joe Biden from the debate, said one House Democrat on the call. It was awful, said another lawmaker. He had no answer to questions about his electability. He seemed oblivious to the polling that shows him losing swing states. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to reassure anyone. He took no responsibility, another lawmaker said. Puck News later provided more detail. One participant said, the call was even worse than the debate. He was rambling. He'd start an answer, then lose his train of thought, then would say whatever. He really couldn't complete an answer. I lost a ton of respect for him. Then there was the moment when Representative Jason Crow, a former Army Ranger who was awarded the Bronze Star, asked Biden about the importance of national security to voters. Here's how Puck reported Biden's response. First of all, I think you're dead wrong on national security, the president says, the emotion at times garbling his words. You saw what happened recently in terms of the meeting we had with NATO. I put NATO together. Name me a foreign leader who thinks I'm not the most effective leader in the world on foreign policy. Tell me who the hell that is. Tell me who put NATO back together. Tell me who enlarged NATO. Tell me who did the Pacific Basin. Tell me who did something that you've never done with your Bronze Star, like my son. What the is that even supposed to mean? Jason Crow received his Bronze Star with a V device for combat valor. Beau Biden got his Bronze Star because his daddy was Vice President Joe Biden. Then Biden turned absolutely delusional, saying, things are in chaos, and I'm bringing some order to it. And again, find me a world leader who's an ally of ours who doesn't think that I'm the most respected person ever. It's not breaking through, Mr. President, to our voters. You ought to talk about it, Biden shot back, listing his accomplishments yet again. On national security, no one has been a better president than I've been. Name me one. Name me one. So I don't want to hear that crap. So as per usual, Joe Biden wasn't taking responsibility for anything. Instead, he started blaming Democrats for not talking about his accomplishments. What were they supposed to talk about? Record high inflation? Record high mortgage rates? Record high illegal border crossings? So it should be noted that the Zoom call ended roughly 1 hour before the attempt on Donald Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania. And yet all of this near tragedy may have been great news for Biden himself, politically speaking. Going into the weekend, all the talk in Washington had been about how the 81-year-old president simply had to step aside for the sake of the republic. One congressman said, had the assassination attempt not occurred an hour later, I imagine 50 people on that Zoom were ready to come out publicly against him. And obviously the attempt on Trump's life was the story, which gave a temporary reprieve to Biden's election hopes. But it wouldn't last long because Biden is a barely functioning human. Here's Biden addressing the NAACP, I think.
Race riots in Springfield, Illinois in 1908. The NAACP was formed. That's what started it. Look, folks, the idea that corporate-owned housing is able to raise your rent $300-400 a month or something, under what I'm about to announce, they can't raise it more than $55.
Now, while the NAACP is always going to vote blue no matter who, Joe Biden has been hemorrhaging support from black voters in general. So in an attempt to re-energize his campaign with said demographic, Biden agreed to be interviewed by BET, i.e. Black Entertainment Television.
It's all about treating people with dignity. And it's about making sure that, look, I mean, for example, look at the heat I'm getting because I named the Secretary of Defense, a black man.
And it appears that Joe Biden forgot Secretary Lloyd Austin's name, calling him the black man. Everything's fine, guys. Nothing to see here.
I would ordinarily be going through black neighborhoods on the foot, working through the neighborhoods. I have a tradition. I close every campaign, no matter what campaign, going into the projects and going down the east side. And, hey, Joe, well, how you doing? Well, we can't do that now. Not because of the black community, because it's too dangerous for me to be out walking on a company.
So Joe Biden, on Black Entertainment Television, said he can't go to the east side of Wilmington, Delaware, because it's too dangerous. Joe Biden doesn't seem to have those same safety concerns in a white neighborhood, though. Trump, on the other hand, has no problem making appearances in Harlem or holding a rally in the Bronx. But, Biden doesn't need to go to black neighborhoods anymore. Blacks are ultimately preordained to vote for him. Come on, man.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
So on July 17th, Joe Biden was scheduled to appear at the Unidos US annual conference. But Biden had to cancel, and President and CEO Janet Murguia broke the bad news to the audience.
Regrettably, I was just on the phone with President Biden, and he shared his deep disappointment at not being able to join us this afternoon. He just tested positive for COVID. He said to tell my folks that we're not going to get rid of him that quickly.
And that announcement, along with video of Joe Biden walking up the children's steps of Air Force One looking like absolute crap, felt like the breaking point.
And what jumped out at me, and I'm sure to others as well, I didn't see him wearing a mask as he was with those other people on the tarmac there. What does that say to you?
Well, I think anyone who has active COVID now should wear a mask.
I know it's a pain in the neck, but it's a patriotic responsibility. It's a patriotic responsibility.
So by Sunday, July 21st, 5 senators and over 30 House members were publicly calling for Joe Biden to leave the race. It was even being reported by CNN that former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi privately told Joe Biden that if he didn't drop out of the race, he was going to lose in November and destroy Democrats' chances of winning back the House. And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer had visited Biden at his beach house in Rehoboth and bluntly told him he was going to lose. In less than 3.5 weeks, the political fallout from Biden's dismal debate performance was too overwhelming. So on National Ice Cream Day, I swear that's real, Joe Biden announced that he was dropping out of the race. In his letter, which Joe Biden allegedly wrote, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. And while it has always been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." So the Democrats staged a coup against a sitting president and were successful in removing him from his own ticket. But it's the Republicans that are a threat to democracy.
The president believes that it's best for the country that he not be in the Oval Office for another 4 years. How can you assure the American people that he's up to be in the office for the next 6 months?
He wants to finish the job that he started and delivering more historic results for the American people. And look, he didn't step down from campaigning or from running because he didn't believe he can serve in a second term. That is not why.
He believes that he's capable of serving another 4 years, but he just doesn't believe that he can win another 4 years?
I will let the president speak for himself.
Can you talk a bit more about how he's feeling after making such an extraordinary decision? Like you said, making it quickly.
Yeah.
Did he feel bullied to leave the race?
I'm going to let the president speak for himself.
But spoiler alert, Biden didn't answer those questions.
So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. There is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now.
But just 1 week prior, Biden claimed that he couldn't pass it to someone else.
And look, when I originally ran, you may remember it, I said I was going to be a transitional candidate. And I thought that I'd be able to move from this to pass it on to someone else. But I didn't anticipate things getting so divided.
But that's Joe Biden's fault. He ran on the promise to unite America. Instead, he routinely called half the electorate violent MAGA extremists who want to destroy democracy. In fact, it was a central theme of his dropout speech.
I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title. We have to decide, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect, freedom, justice, and democracy? And those of us who cherish that cause, cherish it so much, a cause of American democracy itself, must unite to protect it. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy, because this is critical to our democracy. The worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. So let's act together, preserve our democracy.
So Biden isn't going to run because he has to save democracy. Yet less than 3 weeks prior, Joe Biden sent this letter to congressional Democrats. We had a democratic nomination process, and the voters have spoken clearly and decisively. I received over 14 million votes, 87% of the votes, cast across the entire nominating process. I have nearly 3,000 delegates, making me the presumptive nominee of our party by a wide margin. I feel a deep obligation to the faith and trust the voters of the Democratic Party have placed in me to run this year. It was their decision to make, not the press, not the pundits, not the big donors, not any selected group of individuals, no matter how well-intentioned. The voters, and the voters alone, decide the nominee of the Democratic Party. So how can we stand for democracy in our nation if we ignore it in our own party. I cannot do that. I will not do that. So weeks prior, Biden made the case that 14 million Democrats voted for Joe Biden in the presidential primary. But now he's endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris, and enough delegates have agreed to change their vote from Biden to Harris. Now, as a reminder, not a single primary voter cast their ballot for Kamala Harris to be the presidential nominee. But don't worry, America. According to experts, that means American democracy is working.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Anyway, that's it for now. Please follow me on X at Don't Walk Run. And while you're at it, please subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time. If there is a next time.